there, I'm Catherine Terrell Kostelik, here for Life After High School for Students with Disabilities, Post-Secondary Transition. Today we're talking about social media do's and don'ts, and I'm here with Brandy New, Instructional Technology Coordinator for Hardin County Schools, and Officer John Thomas, Public Information Officer for Elizabethtown Police Department. Thank you all for being here. Let's start out and just talk a little bit like statistics. How prevalent is social media use, especially for teens and young adults?
Okay, so estimates are about 90% of teens and young adults are using social media of some sort. And I think another important thing to remember or to think about is that 70% of employers are actually checking social media accounts before they employ people for a job. And then about 50% continue to keep a track, of employers continue to keep track of their employees' social media accounts. So as far as employability, it's a really big deal.
Okay, I did not realize that employers were consistently checking after they had hired someone. What are the most popular, I guess, social media platforms or websites that young adults and teens are using?
Well, since I'm an old lady, I'm not exactly. No, I think you're thinking Facebook.
Yes.
You're thinking Instagram, Snapchat, maybe Twitter, Tumblr, even Pinterest is something that gets checked by employers.
Okay.
Because you can kind of look at people's Pinterest boards and see where their interests are.
Okay. If employers are checking it that often, what are some ways that teens and young adults can appropriately use social media? What do they need to be, I guess, doing to their profiles? How do they use it when they're at work?
Yeah, I think we need to think about what is okay for, if I was a teenager, what my friends and I might consider acceptable is very different than what my employer might consider acceptable. One big thing might be that my employer is probably going to be older than me. So we've got kind of a generational difference there. People who are older have different ideas about what's acceptable on social media. So you have to keep in mind, is what you're putting on social media, would your mom be okay with it? Would your teachers be okay with it? If I don't want my parents or my teachers to see something because I would be embarrassed, then I probably don't want to put it on social media on a public account because my employer could have access to it as well. And thinking about accounts, am I going to make my accounts public or private? And I know lots of people use social media accounts to make friends or to make connections with other people. So you think, oh, I'm going to make this public. However, once you've hit those buttons and decided that your profile is public to the world on a social media account, it's the whole world. So you need to think about, am I going to make this with my real name? Am I going to make this with my real picture? And if so, then I might need to set my privacy settings. And you can do that on any kind of social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, you can make it to where people can't find you or people can find your main page and then can't find the rest of you without your permission. And that's something to keep in mind, is who is my audience and who's going to be seeing this.
Talking about public versus private, what about the types of photos and language you're using on your page or account, even if it is private? What should you maybe not be saying or not be using?
I think for photos, a lot of times if we think about what you're wearing in a photo, and I know that if I've got this picture of me in my bathing suit and I looked really good, that's great, and you're proud of that. However, my employer may not want to see that much skin, quite frankly. I mean, they may not want to see that much skin, and they may not want, if I'm working with the public, so let's say I have a job where I'm checking people out at a register, then that face that's dressed nice and showed up to work on time, if that face is associated with a picture where I'm not properly dressed or don't have a whole lot of clothes online, that looks bad for my employer. And now whether I want to think about it or not, I am kind of tied to my employer. They'll have their own regulations maybe about what it is, and you need to ask your employer that. Do you have some sort of regulation between what is public or what is my social media presence or not? And that's a kind of fuzzy line, so maybe just ask. So think about what you're wearing. Think about gestures. There are certain gestures where I'm doing things toward the camera that I would not sit here and do right now, knowing that this is going to be seen publicly. So if those can be seen, and also language as far as what I'm using, you don't want to cuss. We don't want to use bad words. We also want to be careful about the kind of language we're using as far as being mean or hateful or angry to other people. People have differing political views, which is fine, and that might be a part of your social media presence. You can probably speak to that more than I can, but if you are threatening someone or hate speech, that's going to be the kind of thing I've got to really tiptoe around.
Sure. I mean, one of my jobs at the police department is I am a recruiter, and I do background investigations on employees, so I can absolutely confirm what you're saying. We check people on social media diligently. If you're on social media, if you have an imprint there, and whatever you put on social media is there forever. That's something that's important to remember. You can delete it, you can remove it, but it's out there somewhere, and it can be traced back to you. And I think it's important for people to consider social media as public domain. Even if you have your settings to private, eventually it's going to find its way into the public domain, whether we like it or not. A lot of social media platforms constantly change their privacy settings, and they don't do a really good job telling people, hey, we've changed the privacy settings. Now things that you had private are now public. It's a good idea to go back into your social media and constantly review whatever changes they've made. If you're trying to keep your profile as private as possible, you have to stay up to date every couple of months, making sure that the platform hasn't made a change that's now made something public that you had private before. But what you say in social media will absolutely affect your reputation the rest of your life. And that's only going to expand moving forward, I believe. I think more and more employers are going to realize the best judge of someone's character is not what they say in an interview that's structured, where they're dressed nice and they're putting on their best face. The real you is going to come out on social media. And that's been true in a lot of the background investigations I've done on people. You know, obviously at a police department, we're looking for people of high integrity with clean backgrounds, and they can come into an interview and present a very good face, but then I go on social media, it's full of vulgarity, crude pictures, maybe even hate speech, which isn't necessarily illegal, but we're not interested in hiring somebody who's not opposed to engaging in inflammatory hate speech against other people. And that would come back on us if we were to hire somebody knowing this is the kind of person that they are because of what they've put on social media. So, you know, as far as criminal behavior is concerned, yeah, if you go on social media, you're angry and you say, I'm going to hurt this person or I want to hurt this person, absolutely. You've now entered into the realm of criminal charges. And a lot of people, they just feel, when they're on social media, they're alone, usually on a computer, on a device, they kind of feel invincible. But you should feel the same way that if you're out in public in a crowded mall, you shouldn't feel any different than when you're about to post on social media. Would you yell out, I'm going to kill somebody in a crowded mall? Would you disrobe in a crowded mall? Would you scream out vulgarities in a crowded mall? And a lot of people don't think that way, but that's really how you ought to think about social media. You're truly in a public forum, even though it may not feel that way. And that's the way, that's the paradigm that you've got to accept, that when you're on social media, you're in public.
Yeah. And I think talking about keeping things private, or, oh, I sent this to my friend, if it's a picture or if it's whatever. And unfortunately, they may be your friend today, but they may not be your friend in 6 months.
Exactly right.
And they still have that information. I think like Snapchat is something to talk about specifically, because it disappears. But does it really disappear? Well, I know, I've heard people say, well, I know if they take a screenshot. Well, if they take a screenshot, the damage is already done, and you can't retrieve that. Or they can take a picture from one phone of another phone. So it just multiplies, and nothing is actually ever private.
And the big, bad, ugly secret about Snapchat is that even though it disappears from your phone, those photos are actually saved on a server. In fact, there was an incident that Snapchat sought to keep very low-key. They didn't want people to know. A hacking group, I believe from Russia, was able to hack into Snapchat's main servers, and they threatened to release all the photos that were on their servers into the public domain unless they were paid so many $1 million, and Snapchat paid them.
Wow.
But the truth is, that could happen again. Your photos are saved and theoretically could be released to public domain, so think very carefully before using Snapchat.
Say I'm a young adult and I've applied for a job, I've kind of scrubbed my profile, I've gotten a job. How do I now use social media appropriately with my coworkers, with my boss, friending people, communicating about work? What are some tips to use, I guess, after you've gotten the job?
I think it's very important to remember that my social media, maybe I have friends, family, and I would say one thing. That is different, my private life, than my work life. And so that's for any conversation you're going to have. I would not curse when sitting, even with a coworker in the lunchroom. So if I now invite that coworker to be my friend on Facebook and I curse, then I've kind of blurred those lines. So I think it's important to keep your private life one way and think about your public life being another, and work is a part of your public life. So you keep those two things very separate, in my opinion, because if you start to blur the lines, then you've kind of opened that door for yourself.
Well, and that kind of leads into, I mean, everyone has a bad day. Everyone has a day they're frustrated with their job or frustrated with their employer, and people just vent on social media. Good idea, bad idea to vent about your employer or a work day?
Very, very bad idea. So, and that's probably going to be in your contract for your job. You cannot go to social media and complain about your boss. You cannot go to social media and tell stories about something that happened at work that day with a horrible customer, because that customer, now you have kind of exposed them. Even if you don't use their name, it is not appropriate to use your social media as a way to say anything negative about any part of your employer. That would, for most jobs, be grounds for being fired.
Absolutely. I mean, most employer policies now are, if you do anything detrimental to the employer's reputation, and that's very vague, but that's the way most policies are written, then you can be terminated. And if you're complaining about your boss, if you are talking badly about a product or service that you offer, if you're saying this is just a lame, stupid place to work, things like that, that will absolutely come back on you. Don't say anything on social media that you wouldn't say in front of your boss. I mean, that's a good way of looking at it.
What about, like, I've made a good relationship with some of my coworkers and my boss even, and we're friends on Facebook, we're friends on Instagram, and I need to talk to them about something work related, or I need to call in sick for the day. Can I send them a message on Facebook? Can I send them an Instagram direct message? Or do I need to stick to my work email calling them? How do I navigate those sort of different avenues of communication?
Okay, so I think from a professional standpoint that you need to think about when is the appropriate time to use like a social media direct messaging service. When is the appropriate time to say maybe a text message, an email, make a phone call, or even an in-person visit. I do not think it is ever appropriate to contact your employer through a direct message in Facebook or Instagram or whatever, because they are not legally required to check that. So if I need to say something to my boss, I need to call in to work, that is going to be, I either know in advance, hey, you can just ask your boss, hey, how do you want me to contact you if I can't be at work today? For most employers, that's going to be an email to their work email or a phone call in to speak to someone and let them know I'm not going to be at work today. And you need to think about if you have a problem with your employer, a lot of times it might be more comfortable to shoot a text message or an email. However, if you think you've done something wrong or you know you're in trouble, that's going to be the kind of situation where you need to pick up a phone and call, or you need to go see them in person. You need to think about the severity of the situation. If you're not sure what to do, I would say go and ask an older adult, because once again, there's a big difference generationally in what's acceptable on social media and what's not. Chances are your employer is going to be older than you, so I would maybe go ask my parents or ask a teacher that I trust or an adult that I trust and say, hey, this happened. Should I give my boss a call, or should I show up, or can I use an email? Because they are different levels of contact, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I think most employers will actually have in their policy, they'll have a call-in policy. If you're going to call in to work, here's how you do it. And you need to follow that, because the call-in policy protects an employer if they have to do disciplinary action. Okay, you did a no-call, no-show. You get so many points, and once you accrue so many points, you could get disciplined or terminated. But as long as they have that policy documented, then they can enforce it. So make sure you know your policy, which they'll usually tell you in orientation. If you need to call in, here's how you do it. Send a call or a work email.
And orientation can be overwhelming, right? Like
it can.
hours
It's a lot. It's like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information.
So I think it's better to just get a hold of your employer. Ask.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
If you don't know, ask. Yes.
You're not going to be fired for asking questions. And I think a lot of times we want to seem like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I've got this. I heard every single word in orientation. Nobody expects you to memorize every single word during orientation. So it's okay to ask your boss, hey, how was I supposed to handle this? Hey, how was I supposed to handle this? It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that you're not smart. It's actually a good sign that you're asking questions and that you have to check in. And it's totally okay to ask them questions.
I've been working for the police department for 11 years. I still ask questions almost every day. How am I supposed to do this? There's just too much to remember.
It is, yeah.
That's good advice, especially for people in a first job or starting out in a job. You hate to feel like you're asking questions. You want to feel like you know everything.
That's part of learning, asking questions.
It's better off to ask.
Another thing I wanted to touch on is, it's fun to scroll through your phone, look at Instagram stories, that kind of stuff, and maybe you're having a slow day at whatever your job is. Is it appropriate to kind of take some downtime at your desk or at your wherever your post is and check social media during the day, or should you stay off of that when you're on the clock?
So a part of my job is I teach a high school class, and so we are talking about job interviews, we're making resumes, we're also starting to go out and to do interviews. I'm speaking from that and working with my high school students. It is not appropriate ever to check your phone and your social media accounts while you're on the clock. So if you've clocked in for the morning or for the day, for the 2 hours until your break, your phone needs to stay away. Some employers are going to have policies that say, leave your phone in the workroom, leave your phone in the locker. Some might let you keep your phone on your person. However, it's probably still a rule, do not get your phone out and check it, even if you're slow. If the business is slow, then that would be a good time to say to your employer, hey, when it's slow at work, what can I do? And it might be sweep, it might be dust, it might be check on this kind of paperwork, but it would be better to ask them what you should do to fill up that space and that time. It is not going to be appropriate to have your phone out while you're being paid to work and do your personal business and check your personal social media ever. On your breaks, yes. On your lunch, yes. But not while you're being paid to do your job.
I also wanted to touch on safety, keeping your personal data safe, keeping yourself safe when you're using social media accounts. It's easy to make friends, that's why they're there, but how do you kind of keep yourself safe and your personal information and financials safe?
No, absolutely. A lot of people don't know that identity theft has now replaced the drug trade as the #1 type of organized crime. It's everywhere. There are thieves out there that are looking to steal your information, both in terms of your personal identity, things about you like your name, your date of birth, your social security number, and then obviously your financial information. They're always looking to steal your credit card information, bank card if you have one. It's very important to know when you give your personal information to anyone that you have confirmed who the source is, which online it's often very difficult to do. We've seen a scam here recently where these scammers are copying and pasting basically the profile of a person and then contacting all their friends on Facebook Messenger using the same profile picture and the same name, and they're asking for some financial help. And in a couple cases, some people have fallen for this scam. If you don't know for sure who you're talking to, don't give out personal information, period. And usually, social media is the wrong place to put out personal information because it's almost impossible. Even if you see a profile picture and you see a name that you think you recognize, it's almost impossible to know for sure that's who you're talking to. So if you need to give out your personal information, say to a school, if you're applying to school, and maybe you've had some contact with a student, a student advisor or something like that, I would still advise pick up a phone and make a phone call to an official number that you recognize. Don't respond to even an email message or a social media message asking you for information. You just cannot trust the source, and that's for all ages and all situations.
And the other thing I wanted to touch on is, you graduate high school, you're applying for jobs, you're also probably dating, meeting new people. What about online dating and safety? Do you have any tips for young adults in that area?
It's kind of the same vein. It's difficult to know. If you've only met someone online, you don't really know who you're talking to, who you're dealing with. I was reading a study here recently that as many as 25% of online profiles are fake. They're not who the person claims to be. So if you're going to engage in online dating, which a lot of adults do, I'm not saying that you should not, be very cautious is the thing that I would advise. You know, a rule that I try to follow when it comes to social media is I don't friend people that I don't know personally.
Okay.
You know, if I've met them, you know, once or twice out in public, I know it's a real person, then I feel, you know, somewhat more comfortable in allowing that person to be a social media friend. Now, for online dating, that's kind of the purpose, is you meet people that you normally would not meet in person, and I get that. Make sure that if you're going to do an online dating service, use something that has been vetted, like Match.com or eHarmony, a well-known dating service. There are some smaller dating services that don't do a really good job vetting the people who are involved. eHarmony and Match and other big dating companies, they try to vet the information of the people that they allow to participate in that, so there's a higher level of security, whereas some of these smaller dating organizations, they don't do a whole lot of background investigation on the people that participate, and if you don't even use one and you're just looking on social media for someone, that's really not a safe way to find somebody to start an online relationship with.
I know, and it kind of tags into online dating and just meeting people that you've met sort of online or social media wise in person, location tagging and sharing your location on these apps.
Yes.
Good idea, not a good idea?
Not a good
How do
idea.
Okay.
You know, and I think some people, they just like to keep everyone updated on what they're doing, where they are, what's going on in their life, which I know that can be a lot of fun. But frankly, if you're constantly updating your location, you are sending out sensitive information that people don't need to know about you.
Okay.
Especially if you're going to be traveling or away. You know, a lot of burglars, people who look to break into people's homes, they will go on Facebook and see who's traveling right now, who is out of town. Okay. If somebody is angry with you, they're looking to find you, they're looking to cause you harm, and you're constantly posting your location, you're making their job easy to find you. It's simply a good idea. Don't give away your location. Okay. You know, you can take a trip somewhere and come back and talk about it, and that's fine. Don't give people a live update as to your location. That's just not a good idea.
And that goes back to, if they're your friend today, they may not be tomorrow,
Exactly.
or they could be angry.
Exactly.
So you have to really think about that.
Okay. Well, thank you both for being here so much. This is great information and tips for people to keep in mind as they sort of navigate that post-high school life. That's all we have today. Thank you so much.